Welcome back into the Conference USA Roundtable. I'm your host for the evening, Jake Bolden. I'm the proud host of the Blue Raider podcast and your moderator for tonight's Conference USA preseason basketball preview with all of your favorite Conference USA Roundtable members. Myself, I have the privilege of going first and covering my MTSU Blue Raiders. But before I get to all that, I do want to take just a second. First of all, for those that are tuning in tonight, if you like what we have here at the Conference USA Roundtable, I highly encourage you to follow us over on Twitter at CUSA Roundtable. There you'll find everything from all of our podcasting members on a daily basis, where we have all of our uploads, not only just on our streams and our posts as far as our recordings go, but of course, everything social media related. You got a lot of great members in this community here, so I would hate for you to miss out on everything that's going on in Conference USA. So make sure you head over there and follow us at Conference USA Podcasting Roundtable. I do want to take a second to shout out La Tech Sports Central Twitter account for helping us create that new intro video. Very clean. I like it a lot. And of course, to all the supporters that are here this evening, and I want to go ahead and we'll dive into the preview talk here as we'll get into the as voted on by our members, the standings for power rankings. You've got the La Tech returning Conference USA regular season champs at the top of the poll. Western Kentucky very narrowly behind them, just right behind them by a few points. It's also Sam Houston State. Those first three picks very close together. And then our second tier with a few that actually did receive first place votes in Liberty and MTSU. Just behind the Blue Raiders is going to be the Miners. And then when it came to points, your back four had quite the margin between them, with New Mexico State at 7, Kennesaw State at 8, and then Jacksonville State and FIU narrowly beating each other out there for the last two positions. So that is your as voted on by the podcast round members that you will speak to and hear from tonight. That was our power rankings. And then I want to show you our all CUSA team as also voted by all of us. When it comes to guards, you've got Don McHenry from Western Kentucky, Justin Porter from MTSU, Caden Matheny returning at Liberty, Lamar Wilkerson also returning from Sam Houston State. And then in the forwards, you have your player of the year as voted on by us, Daniel Bacho from Louisiana Tech, Zach Cleveland from Liberty, and then Otis Frazier III from UTEP. And then also want to throw a shout out to Coach Mudge over there at Sam Houston State. He is our voted upon Coach of the Year prediction. And then the newcomer from the D2 Arkansas Tech there at Liberty is Talon Peter, a high-scoring guard, is transferring from, like I said, Arkansas Tech to Liberty. So we'll hear a lot from him as well as from Ben Reynolds coming up, and all of your favorite podcasting members. But of course, as I said, I have the privilege of kicking the show off, so I will take a few minutes to go ahead and talk about my Blue Raiders when it comes to this upcoming season. On the men's side, a lot of expectations for the men this year. Last year was very disappointing on the injury front. Had our star point guard Cam Weston go down with an injury in the third game of the season. And from there, that kind of derailed a lot of the offensive scheming for the Blue Raiders, having to make shift a new point guard because there wasn't an experienced point guard on the bench, where we had to call upon Justin Porter, who you just saw there on the All CUSA team. Podcasting team, had to convert himself into a point guard. And then this year, thankfully, Cam Weston returned. And then we also got to pick up in Jalen Counter from IUPUI to be a backup point guard. So we have depth back at point guard once again. And then Justin, who I think will become a more well-rounded player because of that year and experience at the point guard position, can go back to a more comfortable shooting guard position, could be counted on to be a scorer from there, also being a good catch and shoot, very aggressive scorer at the rim. So I think that there's a lot to be gathered about what we learned about ourselves last year moving into this year. We unfortunately lose our big man, Jared Coleman-Jones. He transferred to San Diego State, but we were able to pull Issam Mustafa from TCU, who's most famously known for his time at Coastal Carolina, where he averaged a double-double there for the Chanticleers. So we're excited about what he brings to the table, and also a little bit different dynamic from him from what we've seen in years past with Jared Coleman-Jones, with DeAndre Dishman, someone who is more of a banger down low, on the low block, fighter for rebounds. He, as I said, averaged a double-double at Coastal Carolina, so I would imagine that's going to be his role for this team this year, is to be more of that rebound-focused, as well as a low-block scorer that we need, that physical presence down low, because we have a few scoring options around the perimeter that could certainly space the floor for the Blue Raiders this season. And to build upon that, when talking about the offseason moves for the Blue Raiders, I've already mentioned Jalen Counter as well as Isam Mustafa from TCU, but you've got quite a few other guys that are joining the ranks with this. Another one that'll make an immediate impact is going to be Kamari Lands. I think he's going to play more of the stretch four position, very tall guard that's very capable of scoring at all three levels. He's coming from MTSU from Arizona State. He went to Louisville out of high school, very highly recruited aspect out of high school, very big scorer. So he didn't have those in his first two stops in Louisville and then Arizona State. But we're hoping that, again, the change in pace of the game at the mid-major level, we can see that scoring capabilities resurge that we saw in high school for him. Another name is Alec Oglesby, who won't make an immediate impact due to an injury this offseason. He is expected to return before conference play, hopefully sometime in December, to get some games under his belt before conference games. But again, a guy from Stetson, just came off of an NCAA tournament run, also played on a UNC Wilmington squad prior to that, who had success in postseason tournaments as well against us 3 years removed. So another guy that, again, has quite the pedigree of scoring and also comes from a good program that knows what it takes to win. So that's something that this team, in my opinion, desperately needs, that leadership and experience. Just a few other guys as well. You've got Jared Hall, a local product from Tulsa. I think he's going to be more of a role player this year, maybe not see the uptick in minutes from some of these other guys that I've already spoken about. And so that pretty much rounds out, Christian Fussell as well from UT Martin. He transfers back to MTSU, where he spent a year or a few years at UT Martin. Again, kind of more of a role player down there in the center block for Isam, as well as Chris Loof, who I'll get to here in a minute. And then if you consider Justin Porter as a transfer pickup, I guess in a way you do, because he transferred out for a few months and then opted to come back to MTSU. And that was a huge get for Coach Nick McDevitt and squad to get him back on board with this team. A very senior-laden team. I believe it's 8-9 guys in their last year of eligibility. So there was a window for this team to be very successful. It's got to be this time. So I think we put a lot of our eggs into this basket, but I feel promising about where this team sits today, as well as where they'll look when we get into conference play, albeit things remain healthy, because that was what derailed our season last year. We received some votes to win the conference last year in the preseason poll. We received exactly one this year in the media poll. So you hope that you can get that that expectation that you've set, that precedent that you've set for yourself 2 years removed from a 26-win season and a 19-win season, and you won an East Division title. So you're hoping that you could set that precedent for yourself, that now you have a squad that's experienced, that's deeper than what you saw last year, that you can get your feet back underneath yourself. As far as those that are returning, I've already touched on Justin Porter and Cam Weston. Another one that we're really excited about is Chris Loof. We saw what he was capable of doing as a big man down as just a freshman playing behind Jared Coleman-Jones. I think one of the things that a lot of Blue Raider fans want to see out of him is become a little bit more of a scoring threat. I know at times, especially being a freshman in this league, there's a lot of daunting tasks of guarding some big guys like Daniel Bachas, like the Zach Clevelands, like the Otis Fraziers, that it requires a level of physicality that Jared Coleman-Jones brought to the table that we now miss. So we're hoping that Loof takes that next step as far as being a physical scoring presence, but the defensive aspect as well. Loof is very long, being at 6'11". So we're going to need him to be a shot blocker, be a presence down low. And again, when you talk about Isam, he's not necessarily the same type of player as Isam when it comes to being a very physical scorer and a physical rebounder. However, we need him to be a physical presence on the low block. I think seeing a combination of Mustafa and Chris Loof down low, and he brings that physical presence in the 4 position alongside Mustafa, that could be a very daunting front court for a lot of Conference USA. So we expect him to make some strides this year for the Raiders. And then Torrey Alston is another guy that took a red shirt last year as a freshman, didn't play any games at all. But what I'm told in camp and what I've seen at practice is he's a very physical, very quick forward. He comes in at 6'8". He'll play a lot of the 4 position. He may even play some of the 5 if we try to go a little bit smaller. But very dynamic scorer from him. Can score at all 3 levels from what I can tell. Obviously, he'll do most of his damage down low, but he kind of is that more archetype Nick McDevitt player that's very athletic, very long, very quick. So excited to see what he brings to the table, as well as the expectations for this year. As I've already attested to at the very top here, I hope the Blue Raiders, one, we get back to winning ways. We are competing for that championship. I think what sets us apart in years past and when we haven't been successful is the offensive presence. And I think that this transfer portal class is going to play a huge role in getting those offensive guys like I touched on. Esam was a double-double at Coastal Carolina. Jalen Counter was the main offensive producer there at IUPUI, albeit he'll be a point guard too for us. But even when in situations where Cam Weston's not playing, especially maybe early on in the season, again, another scoring threat. And then Kamari Lands, again, if he is any type of the player that we saw there in high school, like he was recruited to go to Louisville to do, to be a scorer, if we can see that come back. Again, you have scoring threats throughout. And then back to Alec Oglesby, the Stetson transfer, another guy that's very capable of scoring, a very efficient three-point shooter at that. So if we can get him, Justin Porter, a lot of these guards to get into that scoring threat that they need to be to get this team back into the top of the conference, because I think defensively, the team is fast. It's, again, more similar to that 26-win team that we saw 3 seasons ago that can defend the full court, again, with the deeper bench that allows you to play more of a full court pressure, whereas last season we're playing a lot more half court, having to muddy the game up a little bit. I think with this group we can play a lot faster. So in hopes that, again, the defensive pressure is there, we have some more scoring threats on offense. Hopefully that can pick some things up for us and set us apart from the top tier of Conference USA, like the Louisiana Tech and like the Western Kentucky. Because to beat those teams, like we saw in the conference tournament when we beat Louisiana Tech, we were able to go blow for blow on the offensive end. Unfortunately, we're not able to do it against Western Kentucky because of their scheming for that. But albeit we understand that the offense really in this league, when it comes to winning the championship, is you have to be able to score just as well as you can defend. And unfortunately, we were pretty single-faceted on that last year, and we only had one real scoring threat on a nightly basis with Justin Porter. So you've got some depth pieces there for those guys, and I think that's ultimately what it's going to take for them to compete for a championship. Real quickly on the Lady Raiders, coming off of another defending of their conference title, going 18-0, only the second time ever in Conference USA history. I believe Rick Insell was robbed of his Coach of the Year award last year because you only go 18-0. Again, only the second time in Conference USA history. You make yourself a run into the round of 32 before you lose to LSU. Unfortunately, you do lose your leading scorer. You do lose one of your top rebounders and all-time Lady Raiders in Courtney Whitson, but you bring back Courtney Blakely from Arizona, who was on this team 2 years ago when they made their run to the NCAA tournament and lost to Colorado. And then Alina Enrique, who Conference USA fans should know from UTEP 2 years removed, where she was the Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year. So now you have 2 Conference USA Defensive Player of the Years in Anastasia Boldareva at 6'6", and then you have Alina Enrique, who is a scoring presence. And as we've already seen on our first exhibition this year, Alina poured in over 20 points in that contest. So we're excited for her. I know she'll be on a little bit of a pitch clock, or a pitch count, I should say, this year, given the concussion history. But we're excited to have her on the team, as well as Courtney Blakely. Now, I don't think you're going to find a guard, not just in Conference USA, but in NCAA collectively, that is as fast as Courtney Blakely. So I don't think this team will miss a step when it comes to defense. When they allowed just 55 points per game last year, the biggest question mark is what can they do on the scoring end? And I feel comfortable with where Courtney Blakely is, as quick as she is, had eight assists, 7 of them in the first half in our exhibition game. And then again, the addition of Alina Enrique is going to be the scoring threat that may even out, because Courtney Whitson, who she's replacing, wasn't as much of a volume scorer as we will see with Alina this year. So Lady Raiders, positive outlook. I think it's a 2-horse race with them and Liberty. I think the biggest thing with beating Liberty is playing defense, because I think obviously both teams are going to score the ball pretty well. We know what Liberty has on their table, but I think the thing that sets this team apart from others is going to be their defensive intensity. And with a lot of new bodies, you have to still preach that a lot. And I think we saw some of that pain in our first exhibition match, but that's the staple of Rick Insell's teams is solid defense. And I think if they can get that under control by conference play, they very likely could go to another 18-0 season. And of course, repeat once again as Conference USA champions. So that does it for my MTSU Blue Raiders. I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. And again, follow us at CUSA Podcast Roundtable. And without further ado, let's get into our next podcast. Joining the roundtable now is Evan Spencer, co-host of the Go Tech Please Don't Die podcast. Evan, how's it going?
Hey, man, it's going well. I've been missing out on the football show, so I'm excited to talk some basketball today.
Absolutely. We're pleased to have you back. And Evan, I'll go ahead and put it out to you. You guys had a great regular season last year, co-champions. You got the 1 seed, had an upset early exit for you guys. Unfortunately, you're going to lose Isaiah Crawford this year, but you return a unanimous preseason favorite in Daniel Baccia. What is the outlook for the Techsters this year?
Yeah, I mean, we're feeling really good about Bulldog basketball going into the 24-25 campaign. Obviously, you lose a former Conference Player of the Year in Isaiah Crawford, so that's going to be tough to replace his production on both ends of the floor. But you got kind of the runner-up player of the conference last year in Daniel Bacho, who kind of explored his draft options, but decided to come back, really develop for another season before he tries to go pro. And we got some really exciting additions. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but very positive energy around this program right now, which is sorely needed with how the football season's been going. So it's the outlook's good here in October.
Let's talk about some of those additions you guys have. Let's if you had to grade out how the offseason went, what are you giving it?
Yeah, I mean, here from the preseason, I'm giving it an A. We lost 3 starters on the team last year, and Crawford, but also a guy in Talik Chavez, who was, I think, 5th in 3-pointers in the conference last year. Really good shooting guard presence. You don't lose 3 starters and still get picked to win the conference in the preseason polls the next year unless you did a good job in the offseason, right? So as far as guys that the fans of this show will need to know about, you're going to want to know about Amari Abram. He's a former 4-star recruit coming in from Georgia Tech. Really high expectations for him at that shooting guard position. He's more of a true point guard, but we've got Sean Newman at that position as a returner. So he's got some playmaking vision in addition to his ability to shoot. We've also got William Jeffries from Pitt, who's another name. He was kind of a rotational player at the 4 at Pitt, but he has been just dominating in camp and kind of leaving no doubt that he should be the starter moving forward with that position. He has elite defensive skills, which is kind of his role playing at Pitt was based on that. But from the sort of fall camp, he's been really looking good at the offensive position. So those are kind of 2 names. There's a bunch more guys I can talk about a little bit later when we talk about the starting rotation, but those are the sort of highlights of the offseason pickups.
Let's talk about the returning production. You've already touched on the preseason player of the year, Daniel Bacho. I have our preseason All-CUSA roundtable selection, as I'm sure you can imagine. Daniel Bacho is a favorite there as well. As far as the returning production, I know you're going to need Bacho to maybe take a step forward with Crawford, or maybe not. What are your thoughts on his game in particular, but as well as some of these other guys that you've got Chavez losing the 3-point production there throughout the lineup? Who are some guys that you're excited about returning?
Yeah, I think Bacho's obviously the headliner really for the whole conference, right? I mean, he decided to return. It's going to make our conference better, a better product on the floor for everybody. They really want him to step up and play more minutes, and they want the offense to really run through him. It was kind of a 1A, 1B last year with, some certain scenarios it would run through Crawford and certain scenarios it would run through Bacho. It's mostly going to be Bacho's team and his offense here. So he talked about at the Conference USA Media Days, working on his conditioning in the offseason and getting ready to step up and play, 32 minutes a game, right? And be ready for that over the long haul of the, 30-plus games in the season. So Sean Newman Jr., obviously the point guard position is going to be huge. It's big to have him back. So, really looking for him to continue what he was doing last year after he transferred in. And outside of them, it's kind of hoping that some of the former rotation guys can continue to develop. So a guy like Will Allen, who's the backup 5, the backup center, he's been injured this offseason, but it's kind of like, dude, we need you to take 12 minutes a game so Bacho doesn't have to play 32 minutes, right? And a guy like Devin Ree, who was a rotational player, maybe 6-7 minutes a game last year. I don't have the stat in front of me, but he's probably going to start at the 3. So we really need him to continue that development. He showed some raw talent last year, but really, show that he's ready to play in that everyday, high minute role.
It sounds like you got a good idea of the main rotation of guys, and we all know, as you highlighted, the big names. Is there anyone on this roster and rotation of players that may surprise the conference, or that this team needs to perform well to continue their dominance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be those guys I mentioned earlier. Amari Abram from Georgia Tech, he's probably slotting in as a starting two. Like I said before, good ball distributor, but hopefully his shot will continue to develop as we hope it could. He started at Ole Miss, then transferred to Georgia Tech. Kind of seemed to take a step back. Don't know what the deal was at Georgia Tech, but at Ole Miss he was playing more minutes, getting a lot more production offensively. Didn't really work out for him at Georgia Tech. So he's said that he's feeling at home with this coaching staff and all that. But the other guy, William Jeffries, that I mentioned before at the 4 position, it's a lot of the, we have Bacho, we have Newman, but like those 2, 3, 4 positions, who's going to step up and who's going to be the guy who can go out and score you 25 points not allow Bacho to be double teamed on every play. That's really what we're hoping to see is those guys step up and be the starters that we think they can be. But they haven't shown that in their previous roles at other schools. So it'll be interesting to see if that can develop.
As we close up the call here on our CUSA roundtable power rankings ourselves, La Tech does narrowly beat out Western Kentucky for that number 1 spot, much like the coaches poll did for the Bulldogs as well. Evan, the bad ending to the way last year went, first round exit. What are the expectations for Coach Hester this year? Is it a championship or bust, or at least get to that point?
I mean, I think with Tech fans, we are in desperate need of going back to the dance, man. And we've been so close, really the last probably 15 years or so. We've been so close so many times, and it's just getting to that conference tournament and falling apart, right? We beat MTSU by 15 points on Saturday and then lost to them when it mattered on Wednesday, by 10, I think, last year. So it's been frustrating, and that's even back when I was a senior in college, we lost to 9-27 UTSA in the first round of the WAC title when we were really expected to win the whole conference tournament. So, I wouldn't say it's like championship or bust. I think the expectation is to be in the title hunt for the regular season. We're not expecting to fall down to 5th and 6th place this year with Bacho and with the guys coming in. Obviously the hope is that you win the conference title, that elusive conference title, and go back to the big dance. But it hasn't happened since 3 days after I was born in 1991. So I can't say that's what my expectation is when it's happened technically once in my lifetime. But I think we have really high hopes that it might be the year finally.
Another team that has high expectations or really a rich history is the Lady Texters. This year's squad, very young. You got to replace some experience down low. But one thing that Coach Storr has done has recruited a lot of height, something that this conference is clearly gearing themselves towards. What's kind of an outlook you've got for the Lady Texters?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we always talk on our show about how we want the Lady Texters to get back to their glory days. It's just not going to happen. We've accepted that now. We're in the acceptance phase, but coming in 7th place in a bad conference is still unacceptable to our fans. So I really hope the Stores can turn it around. They seem to kind of they've plateaued and it's maybe on the downstroke now, but it is very fun to watch, players like Gianna Morris play. She was electrifying as a freshman last year. Obviously you lose Annalore Roberson, who's been a leader and a really elite bucket getter in this conference for probably 5-6 years. With the COVID year, I don't even know. So it's been a long time since we've run out of squad without her. Before we got on here, we mentioned Kiana Walker too from a few years ago. So hopefully Gianna Morris can step up and be that player that we kind of need, the sort of elite superstar level player. At least in Conference USA women's basketball, as far as that takes you. But I don't think the outlook's very good. The conference media poll or coaches poll picked us 5th. That probably feels right. I mean, we mentioned earlier too, the bottom of the conference is pretty low. So if we jump down there, I mean, that's going to be unacceptable. But I don't think we're going to be pressing MTSU for a conference title this year.
Well, I like the vote of confidence from our behalf. But Evan Spencer, the co-host of the Go Tech Please Don't Die podcast. Evan, I appreciate you stopping by and talking some hoops.
Yeah, thanks, man.
We are now joined by our friend Stephen Moffitt over at Topper Talk, the representative for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, to talk a little basketball. Stephen, how's it going, man?
Man, I'm good. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And albeit the 100 miles of hate here, always much respect for what you do over at Topper Talk with Tyler. Let's kind of roll into things here a little bit. You guys come off of a Conference USA tournament championship last year. I say surprise, but not necessarily. You're rated very highly, not only in the media poll or by the coaches poll with Conference USA standard, but also in the podcast roundtable poll as we look at here, finishing second, and it's a very close race in first place with Louisiana Tech. And I think you yourself could definitely make an argument for why Western could be the number one team as opposed to Louisiana Tech. And I think I'll set the stage for you. A lot of it has to do with the experience that you have returning, albeit a new head coach.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a lot of experience returning, especially for today's day and age in basketball with transfer portal and NIL. You know, the fact that we only lost 3 guys and 2 of those were to the portal. One of them was just to eligibility being exhausted. You know, we bring back a lot of experience. You know, we do have a new coach, but it was someone that was on staff. So it's somebody that's really familiar with every single player we have, and then brought in a couple of transfers that he was previously had coached at his other school before he came to Western Kentucky. So, you know, that run in Huntsville last year was special. Obviously, it opened the door for Coach Lutz having an opportunity to go to Oklahoma State. But I'm really glad that we promoted Coach Plona internally, brought back, you know, a huge chunk of the roster. And I think we have a really good chance to potentially run it back and have a special season like that again.
We talked about some of those transfers that he brought in to add to that experience you already have on roster. How do you grade out what happened this offseason? Good offseason, bad offseason, pretty neutral? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think one of the most important things that any new coach has to do, even if it's, you know, hired from outside or promoted from inside, is retain your own players. You know, recruit the people that you already have here, especially in a winning culture, winning environment. You know, we obviously ended the season on a high note. There were some ups and downs during the season. You know, losing 4 straight heading into Huntsville, you know, didn't leave a good taste in your mouth. But I think we showed that this can be a really special team. So the fact that they finished on a high note in Huntsville and then lose a coach, you know, have some uncertainty there for a week or two, but pretty much the whole roster decided to run it back, you know, short of, you know, Brandon Newman following Coach Lutz to Oklahoma State. And then Dante Allen went to Wyoming. You know, the only other player we lost was Rodney Howard, who, you know, is playing pro ball overseas now. So, you know, we kept all the big main pieces, the guys that had more eligibility, you know, the Don McHenrys, the Tyrone Marshalls, the Babacar Faye, Enoch Kalambe, Christian Lander. We brought back a lot of guys that are familiar with the system, with the expectation, and then brought in some good transfers as well. Braxton Bayless is going to be the one I'll highlight. He also had previously played for Coach Plona at Indian Hills. He was the leading scorer last year as the 6th man for his team. So, you know, not really sure what his role will be here. Don't know if he'll, you know, fight for a starting spot. I'm sure if he can, he will. But bringing back what we do, even if he's a 6th player or in that second group rotation off the bench, I think he's a solid addition. So, you know, I've got to give the staff as a whole an A. I think Coach Plona hired some excellent coaches to fill his spot and Coach Guster's spot that also went to Oklahoma State. And then the roster, you know, keeping it mostly intact and then adding a couple good solid pieces to it from the transfer portal and high school ranks. It's really hard to be mad at that because usually, you know, you're going to turn over 50% of your roster from a winning team like we were last year. And then add a coaching change on top of that. You know, it's really, really rare that we brought back as many pieces as we did. But I have to give the coach and staff an A+ for what they did over this offseason.
Some of those returning pieces you talk about, and obviously a favorite amongst voters alike, and I pull up our roundtable All CUSA team, Don McHenry. I mean, he's a guy that you can't forget. All CUSA last year, All CUSA preseason this year with the coaches poll. He's vital to this team's success. I think the big question mark maybe looming around the program this year, or Don McHenry in specific, is what kind of player is Don McHenry without Deontay Allen? And as well as Tyrone Marshall, he's another guy that's got some preseason recognition too. So some of these returning pieces, do you think that their game is going to elevate more? Do they take on more of a? I know Don's already a scorer, but what about Tyrone Marshall and his role with so many big men leaving? So, what kind of production are you expecting out of those guys?
I think Don at every level that he's played at, coming out of high school, kind of under recruited, going the JUCO route, not having a lot of offers, then obviously getting this opportunity to follow Coach Plona here to Western. He's kind of had that underdog chip on his shoulder mentality his whole life, and really showed that he belonged at this level and could play at a high level and lead this team. So I really look for him to even take another step forward this year, maybe be in contention for that Conference USA Player of the Year award, which it'll be hard to wrestle that away from Daniel Batcho there at Louisiana Tech. But Don's a heck of a player. He's just an instant spark plug, instant offense. Good things happen when he has the ball in his hands. And then Tyrone Marshall, you talked about him. I mean, he really ended last season on about as high note as you could. I think he had 24 points at halftime versus Marquette in our NCAA game. He's just a matchup, kind of a nightmare. He's that wing, that 6'7" long athletic guy, can shoot the ball, can get to the rim. Do you put a big on him and try to force him to shoot? Do you put somebody smaller on him and he potentially go by and take you to the rim? If he takes another step forward in what has been a good WKU career, he's going to be a solid contributor this year. I'd also look for him to step forward. And then I also think Babacar Faye, with the departure of Rodney Howard, who kind of emerged last year as that Conference USA Sixth Man of the Year, one of the better newcomers in conference last year, ended up being our second leading scorer at the end of the year. He really stepped up. And now with him leaving, I think Babacar Faye has shown his prowess on the boards. He's a really good rebounder, especially on the offensive end. But he's also has really good savvy footwork, really good in the post. I really look for him to take another step forward. Had some foul trouble issues at times last year. And then another guy I have to talk about is Christian Lander. He's been here. It feels like he's been here for 5 years. So I want to say it's his third year coming from IU, played under Stansbury, stayed when Lutz came and now stayed again. He's just a really special player. He's a really quiet guy on the court and off the court, but he's a really super streaky shooter. He's athletic. He can get to the rim, and led us in scoring a couple times. So I really look for each of those guys to really kind of elevate their game. Losing Brandon Newman, who was a good shooter, good rebounder, good defender, and then Dante Allen, like you said, who was a super streaky but a hot shooter. But we have some guys that can take their place and will gladly take those shots and those reps from them. So I think there are definitely guys that are ready to step up and be even bigger contributors this season.
You highlighted a few of those guys there. Is there anyone on this team that could be a surprise to the conference, or you need as a role player to really step up for this team to take that next step?
I think we have two of them, and I think one of them burst onto the scene a little bit last year. He was Conference USA Freshman of the Week several times, and that's returning sophomore Tegan Moore. He's got a really big body. He's 6'5", 220 pounds. He's a Kentucky boy. He came in last year kind of already with a college-ready body, stepped in and was a solid contributor in the minutes that he got. As the season wore on, he kind of forced himself to be put on the floor. Then we had some injury issues where he had to get in there and play a little bit more minutes. But when he played, good things happened. And I really think he will be battling for a starting spot this year. If he's not starting, he's going to be one of those first one or two guys off the bench. And then the second one is one that I touched on earlier, Braxton Bayless, again, coming in as the former leading scorer at his previous school. He's familiar with Coach Plona and the expectations here with the system in Western Kentucky and what Coach Plona and the staff are going to want from him. So, whether we're asking him to be the leading scorer or just be out there and be a rotation second unit guy, I think he can definitely be somebody that, on any given night, he could be that spark plug. If Tyrone or if Dawn are having an off night, which is bound to happen, you're not going to be, shooting 60% plus and 20 plus points per game every single game. So, if somebody has an off night, that's all right. I think we have some depth on this team that can step up, and be those second, third, and fourth leading scorers to help back up Don McHenry.
Coach Hank Plona tasked with leading the Hilltoppers to another Conference USA championship this year. Stephen, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Before we hang up, anything on the Lady Toppers? Coach Greg Collins, he had a little bit of a scare as far as the roster turnover this offseason, almost lost Alexis Mead, All-CUSA second teamer, was able to pull her back out of the portal. So you got her back. You got some big name transfers this year. What's the outlook for the Lady Toppers?
I don't want to say that this is a make or break year for Coach Collins and the Lady Toppers. But the last couple of years have been a little bit roller coaster, up and down, streaky, with the wins and losses, and obviously not as many wins as we're accustomed to having here. Just in the history of this program, just like yourself and Louisiana Tech, we have a lot of storied wins and success with these programs. And the biggest factor of Coach Collins' tenure so far has been just not having enough bigs in there that can compete, not just in this league, but, in out of conference. And if we want to make an NCAA, we have to have some bigs that can rebound the ball and give us opportunities to, get those second chance points, or, just not allow the other team to get offensive rebounds and have second chance points. So, I really hope it turns around this year. I know there was a lot of roster turnover. There were a lot of fans clamoring last year, maybe for a shakeup with the coaching staff. I'm not one to go, beating on someone's door and, get the pitchforks out and hope for somebody to be fired, because, that is a man with a job, a family, a career. I know he wants to win games just as badly as everyone watching and supporting WKU. But I do hope it turns around this year and is, just a little bit more win heavy, competing for that. If not the number one spot, Middle Tennessee is going to be tough every single year. I think we know that. We expect that. But fighting for that, 2, 3, 4 spot, I think they might have been picked to finish fourth, if I recall correctly. So, if they can sneak up to that, second or third spot in the league and not drop down lower than what they're projected preseason, I think it is an underrated league as far as women's basketball goes. We just want to see us take a step in the right direction. There's a lot of newcomers. There's a little bit more size on the team. Keeping Alexis Mead was huge. So we just really have to turn around and just win some more ball games. It's not necessarily about winning the conference championship this year or even every single year, but just showing improvement and getting better every year rather than just kind of plateauing and, being middle of the pack in the conference.
That is Stephen Moffitt, co-host of the Topper Talk, the WKU representative for the Conference USA Roundtable. Stephen, thanks for stopping by.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me.
We are now joined by Ben Sorrells, host of the March to the Pod, to tell us a little bit about his Sam Houston State Bearcats. Ben, how's it going?
Good. Excited to talk some hoops. A lot of football talk recently, but it's almost hoop season, so ready to talk about it. That's for sure. Your program in general took Conference USA by storm last year. By far the surprise team of the conference. You win the regular season championship. I want to know what's I guess it's a co-championship you have with Louisiana Tech, and then they win the tiebreaker for the tournament. But my question to you: what's the energy like there in Huntsville going into their second year in Conference USA? Yeah, second year in Conference USA, second year under head coach Chris Mudge. I think the energy is really exciting. You returned 6 key contributors from last year, 5 guys who either started the entire year or started during portions of the year. So you returned 5 of your top 8 rotation guys, 5 of your top 8 scorers. Team that won the regular season title last year. Obviously fell short there in the conference tournament against UTEP in the semifinals, but the energy's high. I think this is probably the most talented team we've ever had. I think the league is probably even better than it was last year, so we'll see if that's enough to win the league again. But the energy's high. I think people really want to get back to the conference tournament. It's been 2011 since we've been back to the conference tournament, so pushing close to 15 years now. There's been a lot of regular season success, and so
fans are hoping that we can finally get back to the NCAA tournament and kind of break through this year.
That's right. And good reason to feel that excitement because of all that returning production. To bring up our own power rankings here from the Conference USA Roundtable, Sam Houston State actually finished third in our voting, very similar to that of the media poll voting as well, where you guys also finished third. So that seems to be kind of a consistent voting or landing for you guys. But albeit the voting is very close in that top three with Louisiana Tech, Western Kentucky. But the one thing that seems to set a lot of these teams apart going in from year one into year two, especially when we talk about Louisiana Tech because of the production that they lost, but you guys return. How do you grade out your offseason play? Because that's something that is so important in this day and age in college basketball.
Yeah, so like I said, we bring back 5 of our top 8. So you lose David Barnes, who was your second leading scorer. You lose J.D. Ray, who was just your primary ball handler when he was in the game. Didn't score a lot, but had a lot of assists, got guys open. And then you lost Souleymane Doumbia, your starting center. So you lost those 3, but I thought you did really good in the portal. And I loved what we did in the offseason. And so some of the notable names to watch that we brought in, Dorian Finister from Kansas State. He was kind of their second guy off the bench last year, averaged about 4 or 5 points a game. He'll probably have more of an elevated role here. Khalifa Sacco from Utah State. He was their backup big man behind great Osibor, who was one of the best big men in the country last year. And so he transferred here. And this is the 3rd year in a row we've kind of taken a backup center from a bigger team. In the last 2 years, they've really excelled. Casey Eziagu 2 years ago, and then Doumbia last year. And now you've got Khalifa Sacco in from Utah State. You also have Brennan Burns, who averaged 18 points and 9 assists at the D2 level for one of the top D2 teams in the country. He's fighting for that starting point guard position. And then the last name to kind of know for transfers is Josiah Hammonds. He averaged 11 or 12 points a game at UIW last year in the Southland Conference. And so not a great team that he was on, a great conference, but he put up a lot of points, shot the ball extremely well from 3, which is something we needed. He shot almost 40% from 3 at UIW. So you bring in some quality transfers, and then a freshman to watch too is Jackson Ford, true freshman. He actually had 11 points and 9 rebounds in our scrimmage against Prairie View the other night, 6'8", kind of forward that can do a little bit of everything. So really liked how we kind of plugged the holes that came up this offseason with guys that departed or hit the portal. And I think we had a really good offseason.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of that returning production. And there's really no name bigger on your roster than Lamar Wilkerson. And again, to go back to the preseason All-CUSA Roundtables conference team, Lamar Wilkerson does make the cut. As well as you'll notice on our graphic here, the Chris Mudge does get Coach of the Year. And we'll talk a little bit more about Coach Mudge here at the back end. But as far as the returning production, Lamar Wilkerson, what about their games needs to happen this year for you guys to be successful?
Yeah, I think it all starts with Lamar. And he kind of really elevated last year. His first year, he was kind of our 6th man 2 years ago when Coach Hooten was still here. Last year, he kind of became one of your primary scorers. I think he's going to do the same this year. I'm interested to see if he takes on more ball handling capabilities. He didn't play a lot of point guard last year. Would be interested to see if he takes on that role a little bit more. And then some other guys that are coming back this year that you got to know. I think Damon Nicholas is one. He's like a mini Dennis Rodman. He's about 6'4", 6'5". He's going to score probably 8 points a game and grab 8 to 10 boards, play great defense. I'm interested to see if he can take a step forward, maybe scoring the ball a little bit. He's made jumps the past couple of years up to that kind of 7-8 point per game mark, but would like to see him to start to get into double digits. And then I think another name to know that Sam Houston fans are familiar with is Cam Hoofner. First year at Sam Houston, was an all-conference guy in the WAC. I think was the WAC newcomer of the year 2 years ago. Last year really struggled with injuries. He's had shoulder surgery, I think, on both shoulders over the past 2 years. But I think he's getting back to full strength. And so he's a 6'8" forward that can really stretch the floor, great shooting it from mid-range in the 3-ball. Not going to give you a ton down low, but going to score the ball a lot from the perimeter for a guy that's 6'8". So those are 3 names that I think are really notable when it comes to production. They're all guys that are going into their 3rd year here, or Damon 4th year, and then the other 2 their 3rd year.
I know you hit on a lot of guys right there. Is there anyone in particular outside of, say, Wilkerson that you think could really surprise the league this year?
Yeah, and hitting on the returning production, a guy that really stepped into a role towards the end of last year, struggled during the first part of the year because he came up from the D2 level as Marcus Boykin. Looks like he's put on some weight this year, and he kind of took over as the starting point guard late in the year. Kind of a do-it-all guard, can handle the ball, can score it, can play really good defense. He was actually our second leading scorer in our exhibition against Prairie View the other night. So he looks like he's going to take a big step forward. He was a guy at the D2 level that averaged almost 25 points per game, was really good. Struggled to adjust a little bit last year, but the last month of the season, 6 weeks, really came on strong. And I think he could be your starting point guard this year. So he's a name that I think people could watch out for that could have a breakout year.
Now, tell me, you talked about the woes in the conference tournament last year, losing in the semifinals to UTEP. What needs to happen this year for the regular season success to carry over in the conference title? What is this team missing that needs that run that they need in the conference tournament?
Yeah, I think you got to be consistent throughout the entire year. Last year, it was a team that was very up and down, had a very rough non-conference schedule. And then you really turned it on when conference started. Then I think you lost 2 out of 3 games and looked really bad in the middle of conference before you turned it back on. So it was a very up and down season, despite it being a great record. So I think you got to be a little more consistent. And I think you've got enough veteran leadership on this team that I think this could be the team that gets it done. Wilkerson in his 3rd year in the program, Hoofner in his 3rd year in the program. Nicholas has been here every year of his career, and he's a senior now. Kean Scroggins, who's going to be either our starting or backup center. He's going into his 5th year in the program. And so I think you've got guys that know the culture of this program and can hopefully come through and get us to that NCAA tournament bid.
Absolutely. Well, great stuff. Always from Ben Sorrells of the March to the Pod. Ben, before I let you go, I do always love talking a little bit about the ladies side of things. And I know the Lady Cats are going through a bit of a change this year. Got a lot of new coming players. You returned Sydney Kemp. That's always good news. But what kind of preview can you give us on the Lady Cats this year?
Yeah, I know they were picked last, I think, in the preseason poll, and last year was rough. I think it was a 2-14. I think that was their record in conference play. It's a very new roster. I think 10 of the 13 scholarship players are new. Sydney Kemp is the name to know. Like you said, that's the returner. She's probably going to be your leading scorer. And Coach Justice all offseason has preached defense. I think the defensive identity kind of slipped last year. That's why the team struggled. And so it'll be interesting to see how they gel with so many newcomers. It's a lot of unknowns. So I think they're on an upward trajectory. We've seen teams under Coach Justice really succeed in the WAC when we were in the WAC for a couple of years. So I think it's going to come down to how they gel. There's a lot of unknowns outside of Sydney Kemp. So we'll see what happens. I don't think they're going to be a team that you're going to think is going to win the league. But if they can start to push towards the middle of the league, I think they'll be on an upward trajectory going forward.
Well, great stuff from Ben. As always, I appreciate you joining the roundtable and sharing with us about the Bearcats.
Yeah, for sure. Eat 'em up, Cats.
And our final guest joining the roundtable preseason basketball discussion is Ben Reynolds. He is co-host over at Fan the Flames Basketball this upcoming winter. Ben, how's it going?
Good, man. It's good to be on. Man, I always enjoy collabing with you, man. And basketball season right around the corner. It's kind of weird. I think a lot of people are going to be like, wait, Ben's talking basketball? Funny thing enough, people that are listening, even though I'm a football podcast host, I actually grew up a passionate college basketball fan of the Tar Heels. I worked for the St. Bonaventure Bonnies. And then I also did a little bit of time with the Liberty Flames just in their ticket office. But so I used to be really heavy into it, and now I'm back into it, and I'm excited about this season, man.
And rightfully so. Any Richie McKay team always has an opportunity to win a conference championship. And if you look at our podcasting roundtable power rankings, the Flames finished there in that top half there at the 4 spot, just outside of that upper tier according to our points voting. But even in the Conference USA media poll, when we pulled that one up, you also all the way down in 5th place got yourself a first place vote. So it's a testament to how wide open this league potentially is this year. And as I said, you kind of have the upper hand with the head coach that you do have and some of the returners that are coming back. And we'll get to those guys here in a little bit. But Ben, tell us, what is the
feeling in Lynchburg about this basketball team? What is the expectation for you guys?
I would say cautiously optimistic. I'm personally excited. This is the most excited I've been about a team in a couple of years, honestly. Last year was a down year in a lot of people's mind, but I believe we still finished 18-14, which is in a lot of teams' books a pretty solid year. But for a Richie McKay team that has been one of the winningest programs in the country, it's a disappointment. But we also had a very huge step up in talent when it comes to going from an A-Sun to the Conference USA. And I think people kind of checked themselves a little bit, our fan base, and said, hey, well, okay, maybe this or that. Hey, there were some arguments of like, hey, maybe this isn't McKay's team. Maybe we need to look at. I'm not in that party, never have been, probably never will be. He's a great coach who wants to coach for Liberty, and I'm really excited about this season. We had a couple of guys that have left, and that being longtime players of Kyle Rode and Shiloh Robinson for graduation. Joseph Van Zant headed to Abilene Christian, and they got Broby Peebles going to Belmont. And then Ben Sutherland and Jalen Davis, two of the younger guys, also left for the portal as well. So we do have some subtractions and some turnover, but I think the additions are going to be greater than the subtractions in the long run.
So tell us a little bit about some of those additions. How do you grade out how they did this offseason? It sounds like you have a pretty positive review of it.
Yeah, I would still give them like a B+ because there's still a lot of unknown, but I think compared to the previous years of not really dipping into the portal very much, we decided to go a different strategy with that this year. And with that, I would say Talon Peter is a standout. He's a D2 guard from Arkansas Tech. He's very exciting. He's the guy that I'm probably the most excited about on this transfer and recruiting that they have added. As for some of the freshmen that we added, they probably won't be making an impact for a couple seasons, so I won't talk about them too much tonight. But then we also got two different great forwards and got some size. And that was one of the things that was a big problem last year was our size. We were not very big, and we also didn't have very many athletes. We relied a lot on our shooting prowess, and when we didn't have a good night, we really didn't have a good night. So we added also a transfer from Minnesota, who I believe was a former 4-star, Isaiah Enan. I think I'm saying that right. He's actually originally from Germany. He's a very promising forward, brings a little bit of size. I believe he stands around 6'8", 6'9". Also with Owen Aquino, who's a JUCO transfer, one of the higher rated forwards out of the JUCO ranks. And then we also kind of a low-key addition that I think will surprise some fans was D3 Cedarville addition from Javon Mamer. He is someone that's going to be a great rotational piece, and he's going to have a lot of leadership underneath him. I believe this is his 5th or 6th year of playing basketball. He was a standout at the D3 level. Cedarville and Liberty have a lot of similarities in the sense of universities. So they're kind of like a smaller Liberty without the football team, and there's a lot of trade-off with those two universities. So it's really cool to see us get a guy from there who was very successful there. And then also, this is a guy that won't really affect the team this year, but Josh Smith, who was a starting center for Stetson, one of our former A-Sun rivals, also joined the team. But this year he will be sitting out due to injury that he had last year. So we'll thankfully get him back next year. But this year it'll be nice to have him in the locker room and kind of be a guy that can provide some experience to some of our younger bigs.
Absolutely. That Stetson team fresh off of an NCAA tournament. So there's definitely a level of expertise as far as winning basketball that he brings to the table in the locker room. But Talon, Peter, as you mentioned, the D2 transfer in at nearly averaged 19 points per game. He did win our newcomer of the year as voted on by the podcasting roundtable. And I'll go ahead and transition into the returning talent that you have. You're the only team in Conference USA to have two guys make our list, and that's Caden Matheny and then Zach Cleveland. I'm sure you could make an argument for Zach Cleveland to be player of the year there with Daniel Bacho. He's a lot more, in my opinion, a lot more versatile than someone like Daniel Bacho.
can kind of score at all three levels. Great rebounder, very physical, big, and he just kind of adds to what you have as far as top end talent in Conference USA. But I'll turn it back over to you, Ben, to tell us about the returning talent you have, how it's going to mesh with some of these new bodies. Do you think you guys addressed some of the issues you had with last year's team, as you said, when the scoring wasn't going? Do you have enough scoring threats outside of your top 2 or 3 guys that can really carry this team when maybe the shooting's not on?
Yeah, I mean, Caden Matheny, let's just start with him. He's a guy that's going to have to be special this year. I really do believe, and I think he could be. He's going to have to be the guy that's going to take a lot of the shooting load, and he's probably our most talented shooter. I think Peter might challenge that a little bit. I know he's a very he's very good at step backs and creating space. But so is Matheny. Even despite his size, he doesn't have the size of a Peter. I believe Peter's like a 6'4". Matheny's only 5'11", so quite a bit of difference in height there. But he's a guy that came in from Bowling Green, and he's really fit into this program and become a flame. Like, you could tell that this is a school that he's excited to play for and wants to lead. But then you also got a Colin Porter who's coming back. And last year, I feel like he regressed a little bit. And I know that's kind of like, you're like, really? But he was phenomenal his freshman year. And I think between his size of being at only 5'9", that's what hurt him quite a bit. He's kind of a guy that, thrived off of drawing fouls and making people look silly as a freshman in the A-Sun. And then he comes up and now he's got a lot bigger players and some more athletes around him. So he's had to learn how to adapt. And then you talk about a Zach Cleveland. I'll wrap up with him because he's really the only last guy that had any type of production returning from this team. But he's a guy that really shocked me last year. He really continued to improve throughout the year. And I think, man, might have been in New Mexico State or Jacksonville State. I don't remember, but I remember he was bringing the ball up the floor, did a behind the back dribble, and then took it right to the rim for a dunk and dunked on somebody. And you could just tell he's got a lot of athleticism. He was really a very bright spot on the team outside of Matheny. And Porter had a couple of good nights as well. But those two were really the guys that were carrying this team that, are going to be on this team from last year. So I'm really excited to see his development, but also, see where he's at when it comes to being kind of a guy that's going to be able to get you rebounds, but also score too in many different ways. I'm kind of wondering how much he's developed a jump shot. So that's going to be kind of an interesting development as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of eyes will be on the Flames this year as they are vying for that conference championship. Before we sign off here, Ben, tell us a little bit about the Lady Flames. I know that this is a year that they could be a real threat for a championship.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the Lady Flames. They're probably the team that I watched the most out of the two last year. Just because every night just seemed like if we don't hit them, then it's just going to be a boring night. With the Lady Flames, oh gosh, they had even though their record going on, like in the non-con was because they had such a difficult schedule. You had a Tennessee, you had Duke. This year we get the host Duke. They really had to fight through some really good teams. And, you got Bella Shmuda returning, who is a rebound maestro, and she's a leader who, really, stands up and really wants to play for Liberty. She's somebody that really embodies being a Liberty Flame. And the same thing for Emma Hess. Emma Hess is probably the best shooter on either team. I'm really excited to see her development and leadership. Is great to have her back. And then you got Elizabeth Aegis daughter. I think that's how you say her name. She's returning as a freshman who had a lot of minutes last year. Asia Boone and Brooke Moore, who got hurt early. And then you got a point guard in Jordan Hodge, who's a great defender, a great leader. She had, I think, a couple of nights where she had plus 10 plus assists. And then what's really going to be exciting is getting Peen Steenberger back. Sometimes I'm terrible with names, but she might be the best player in the long run. She's a redshirt sophomore who was hurt all of last year, got hurt in camp and wasn't able to play, and that kind of, I mean, it literally hurt us as a team because not having her, because we were like, oh shoot, now who are we gonna have to rely on outside of Emma and Bella? But that caused for these freshmen to step up. And, we got a couple other rotational pieces in Caroline Sheary and Emily Howard, who are some good bigs that can really get in there and make some rebounds and really sub out, Elizabeth and Bella. But Asia Boone and Emma Hess and Bella Schmuda could really be special, those three alone this year, because they're very versatile. The only thing that hurt us is outside of Jordan Bailey. If I'm trying to, I think that was her name. We lost her, but we also did lose Ella Weigel, who was actually Brooke Moore's teammate out of high school, out of IMG Academy. She transferred back home to Ohio, to Akron. So losing her, hurt for the development of the future, because I don't know too much about these freshmen yet. But she was very highly touted coming out of high school. So losing her really kind of hurt, but she seemed like she was going to get lost in the mix with Peen coming back. So we'll see what happens with that. But, Coach Kerry Green he's getting older, and, these are the last couple of years I think we have for competing for a conference title, but also maybe trying to push to a nice little stretch in the Sweet 16. I know it's a lot more difficult at times with the women's basketball teams to get that stretch, but you can hope that, you put the right pieces together. Maybe you can get a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 run, and, we'll see what this team can put together.
Absolutely. To be a threat in Conference USA says a lot because of the talent that there is at the top half of the conference. But that is Ben Reynolds. He is a co-host for the Fan the Flames football and now basketball. We appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on, man. It was good to catch up. We'll be back around on that football podcast or roundtable. Can't wait to see you guys.
We are now joined by the UTEP representative here at the Conference USA Roundtable. It is Adrian Broadus. Adrian, how's it going, man?
Jake, it's great to be on. Talk some hoops. I'm ready to turn the page. It's time. It's football season's over, man. We're done. We stopped talking about football season at UTEP after maybe September. So on to basketball. I'm excited about that.
I just realized I've got the wrong branding. Let me back this up. My fault, man. All right, we'll do it again.
No
Second
worries,
take.
no worries.
My fault, brother. I was
all good,
just realized.
No worries. All good.
All right. We are now joined by the UTEP representative here on the Conference USA Roundtable. It is Adrian Broadus. Adrian, how's it going, man?
It's going great. It's going great, Jake. It's great to finally turn the page on football season. Football has been awful, and in El Paso, fans will know that they turn the page typically October to November happily to talk some basketball.
That's right. And you tell me a little bit. The season last year ended pretty well, I would say, given how the regular season went, but you did well in the postseason. What's the energy? What's the expectations like there from Miner fans?
Oh, expectations are high, Jake, and they should be high. I mean, this is a team that went all the way to the Conference USA championship game, albeit they weren't a good team in the regular season in CUSA play. They had their lows, but they peaked at the right time. And I'll just throw it out there. I think Joe Golding is a great coach when it comes to conference tournaments. It doesn't matter if it's CUSA. He did it in the Southland as well. And he's proven this. Like when it's a kitchen sink type of game, throw the kitchen sink at the other team. He can he can win some of those games. And you saw that Liberty game. They were down big in that game. In the Conference USA tournament, and they rallied back to win it. Then they go to the semifinal matchup or the quarterfinal matchup against Sam Houston, and they do the same thing there. They were down big, and they come back, rally back, and win that game. So it just didn't happen against Western Kentucky. That team was better on that day, and I feel like better on the season. And so for the Miners, they run it back. It's a lot of continuity this time around. It's high expectations, and you have a lot of returning players here. So you should have a lot of success. That's what a lot of fans think for this UTEP basketball squad.
in today's game, you can't stress enough what happens in the offseason. And I think one thing I know you're happy about with Coach Golding is a lot of continuity for this team for the first time in his career there in El Paso. How do you grade off the offseason for you guys? Do you think that he did well as far as the few acquisitions he did make, as well as keeping the guys there in El Paso?
I think keeping the guys was the biggest plus for me because I really liked the roster last year. I think you could build upon guys like David Terrell Jr., who was the Conference USA Freshman of the Year last year, and he could kind of be this staggered point guard alongside a newcomer in Tarleton State leading scorer Devin Barnes, who I thought was awesome for WAC play last year, and he's been an excellent addition for this squad here over the offseason. But then you also couple it with the fact that Kevin Kalu has been with this squad since his day one as a true freshman. And you talk about Otis Frazier III, didn't do anything at George Mason for his first 2 seasons, has been exceptionally productive over these past 2 seasons with the Miners, and he's back for his final season with this squad. So it feels like everybody's back for a reason. It feels like everybody had a little bit of unfinished business, and because of all of that, the continuity side of it makes me really pumped for this team.
As far as some of the new acquisitions, any names that have really stood out to you in the early going?
Yeah, it's Barnes who's headlining that conversation, who I just talked about. But I'll talk about a couple others like Ahmad Bynum. I mean, this is a shot maker out of the JUCO ranks who can really hit it from all 3 levels, and I just find his game pretty impressive. You know, one of the other ones that you can't take your radar off of him is KJ Thomas, the Amarillo standout. He's going to be a true freshman, and he's going to come to this squad looking to contribute and finding some minutes. It's going to be a fight for minutes in that backcourt, knowing all the players that are there who are trying to provide some depth for this minor squad. But he's going to be somebody who I think is going to be hard to keep off the floor. You talk about David Terrell Jr. winning Conference USA Freshman of the Year last year. Look to KJ Thomas to maybe, I don't know if he wins the Freshman of the Year award, but maybe he sneaks a couple CUSA Freshman of the Week awards here and there and earns some minutes throughout the season.
Yeah, well, I would take a look at the preseason All-CUSA team as voted on by the podcasting roundtable. Otis Frazier III makes the cut there for a lot of us, myself included, someone who I think is a threat on both sides of the floor, given how talented some of these forwards are in this conference, like Zach Cleveland, like Bacho, like you just saw in the graphic there. But to be listed with some of those guys, you got to feel good about the production that he provides for this team, as well as when you're wanting to compete with these top-level teams, you've got to have a guy like Frazier in your corner.
Can we just take a step back and say, wow, CUSA is a lot better this year in basketball, or at least on paper. Looks really good, and I'm happy about this. This is a one-bid league. It's always been a one-bid league ever since I've covered this conference. And this year, could it have an argument to be a 2-bid league? I don't think so. But you know what? Maybe you have more competitive teams from top to bottom. And I think that you just showed that list right there. There's some great players. I love Daniel Bacho. I love watching him play. I love Justin Porter. He's a fantastic basketball player too. And then you also talk about just some of the other players, but of course, Otis Frazier III, a 2-way standout for the Miners this year. The biggest thing I'm looking for is how can he improve that 3-point shot? I think he will, and I think you're going to see him take a lot more of those 3-point attempts. Remember, last year they didn't even run a play for him, so this year maybe some design plays for him offensively will help him create more offensively and help this team out from top to bottom.
Absolutely, and we'll continue the preseason rankings by the podcasting roundtable. Another one here is the overall power rankings. You got UTEP that's finishing in the middle of the pack there at the 6, and I don't have the scoring on the graphic there for you. But when I look back, I know that Louisiana Tech, Western Kentucky, and Sam Houston were definitely your top 3 picks amongst most voters. And then in that second tier, it was Liberty, MTSU, and UTEP, and very few points separated those 3 teams amongst each other. So you could make the argument that UTEP falls in the 4, and then obviously based on the results, they fall down to a 6. But the very few separates them from that 4 to 6. If you could give yourself an argument for UTEP why they deserve to be in that top half, because I think you would, and anyone that knows, again, how important continuity is in this league, especially in college basketball as a whole, that's going to play some dividends when the season comes down to crunch time late there in February and into March.
I'll give you other reasons too, right? Like I think this UTEP basketball squad has improved offensively. You're adding a 13 points a game score and Devin Barnes. You're adding a sharpshooter type of player archetype in Ahmad Bynum, and you couple it with the fact that you hope to get an improved season from guys like Corey Camper Jr., David Terrell Jr., who all had scoring contributions last year. So you have a lot of depth if you're UTEP. You could score more points. I think offense was emphasized more than I've ever seen under a Joe Golding coach team this offseason. And all those reasons right there, I think their offense will be better. And if it was just a sliver better last year, they would have been probably top half of Conference USA in the regular season. It wasn't. And this time around, because of that, I think they'll be, when it's all said and done, I think they have the upside to be a top 3 team in this conference.
As we close up the minor basketball top, I want to turn the attention over to the ladies. What's the outlook you got there for the Lady Miners?
Yeah, I would say that Keitha Adams, it's year 2 for UTEP women's basketball, and for this minor squad, it's a lot of international players, a lot of new faces. I would feel like last year was kind of like year 0, this year kind of year 1, building the foundation of what Keitha Adams wants in the future. But Jake, you and I know this is an NIL world. This is a transfer portal world. And I think UTEP is still in its infancies in those kind of categories right there. So Keitha Adams will be called to do more with maybe less resources in those categories right there. I'm talking NIL categories. And I think once they start to get more with those, like the NIL resources, they'll start to improve their game. And I think it'll happen. She's inflicted a lot of life in this program. I mean, you talk about their alums. Kayla Thornton just won a WNBA championship with New York recently. So you talk about just the alumni, the people, the tradition that is here at UTEP. I think she's going to get this program going in the right direction. I think this year fans will start to see that here really happen and culminate with Keitha Adams in year 2.
By virtue of you being the westernmost team represented in Conference USA for now, as I know you guys are moving on, unfortunately. But let's talk a little bit about New Mexico State. Yeah, fortunately, I'm sure from your perspective, a long time in Conference USA. But you're out there. You're close to our friends out there in Las Cruces. I know you have a little bit of say or understanding more about what's going on in Las Cruces for both of their basketball teams. Let's talk about the men's team there. What do you see from the Aggies and what they could potentially bring to the table for Conference USA?
So let's just start it off. It's year 2 for Jason Hooten. Year 1. Building blocks, trying to get away from that horrible previous regime that was at New Mexico State. So they want nothing to do with that whatsoever, and they do have nothing to do with it. So you talk about Jason Hooten, he's creating culture, he's developing this squad, he's trying to recruit the right players, and he's trying to recruit to Las Cruces, New Mexico. The big advantage he has is he has a fan base that loves Aggie basketball. He has an athletic director that really cares about that squad and wants them to continue. You talk about 2 coaches ago, Chris Jans took them all the way to the NCAA tournament. Who's to say this New Mexico State team can't catch lightning in a bottle here in one of these incoming seasons in Conference USA, run the table, and be the team who comes out in the CUSA tournament to go back to the NCAA tournament. And a program builder like Jason Hooten's the right guy to do it. So I like him a lot. He added some pretty solid guys. He kept some pretty solid guys like Christian Cook. He's the headliner for this squad right there. You talk about him, somebody who comes from the Oklahoma City ranks, but somebody who also shot 35% from beyond the arc. I was having to look up that number right there, Jake, because that one right there, I think he can improve on that this year and maybe be like a 40% 3-point scorer for the squad and be their go-to scorer. They have a tough non-conference slate. After that, it's a gauntlet in CUSA. So are they going to be better than last year? I don't know. It's hard to tell, but I'm pretty bullish on them here for maybe year 3 or 4 under Hooten. I think he's a good coach.
Yeah, in regards to the bottom half of the conference there, newcomer Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State, FIU, a lot of us are down on them, but New Mexico State's kind of the team that is floating between that middle tier to bottom tier because, as you said, if they can catch lightning in a bottle, maybe they can move up there into those middle ranks. So I think a lot of eyes, too, are also in Las Cruces about that rich, historic program that is New Mexico State Aggies basketball if they can kind of get back to their old ways under the new regime. But on the ladies' side, I know that that's not something you're necessarily very as in tune with, but I'll take my 2 cents on the Lady Aggies to give the fans a little bit of a preview on them. The big news
for them as Molly Kaiser returned. I don't think any of us thought that she would return, but she's an all-CUSA guard for them. The Aggies do return one of the top minutes and top points produced last season back on their roster this year. So they got Coach Jody Adams has a lot of those players returning for them, which is always good for continuity's sake. And she also hit the portal pretty hard in regards to getting some scores back onto her roster. Daria Sissoko, she's a forward transfer from Sam Houston State. She played 6 games for the Bearcats and averaged nearly 7 points per game before going down with an injury. Junior college transfer Ania Sinias, a 5'9" guard, who also averaged 9 points per game on 49% shooting, and she still has 2 years of eligibility left. So the one thing that is key for Coach Adams is getting Molly Kaiser the help to get the Lady Aggies back to where that they want to be. The polls have them relatively high up there. They definitely are a team that has a threat to get there to the conference championship. I would say compete with MTSU, compete with Liberty, because that's ultimately what Coach Adams wants. And she's got an X factor. Molly Kaiser is the one for that. But Adrian, any thoughts or thoughts there on the Lady Aggies?
Well, I'll just say this. I mean, when it comes to just playing New Mexico State, period, in basketball, you're talking about tough travel, man. You have to fly into El Paso. Then it's a 40-minute bus ride to New Mexico State. So the travel is an issue. You talk about schools like Florida International, even Murfreesboro, Tennessee. You have to go all the way out to here in El Paso, then to go to Las Cruces. Road wise or travel wise, this one's a tough one right here.
Absolutely. Well, that is Adrian Broaddus. He is the host of the 600 ESPN El Paso, as well as our UTEP representative. And for today, he is also the New Mexico State representative for us on the Conference USA podcast. So, Adrian, thanks for stopping by and talking some hoops with us.
It's great to see you, Jake. It's always great to talk hoops. And let's tip it off, man. I'm excited.
Joining us now on our preseason basketball review is Kai Millett. He is co-host of the OCP, the Owl Chat podcast. Kai, how's it going?
It's going well, man. Thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And, you're definitely an intriguing team for a lot of the fans and listeners here. You're the new addition to Conference USA. One thing, the outlook overall for this conference is it's gotten better. And, the addition of you guys who had a strong start to your year last year, maybe not as favorable ending, but as you've mentioned to me off camera, that it was a good trend for you guys given the history of Owl basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year didn't feel like the previous 15 years before the NCAA tournament run. There's, the buy-in stuck around. People are coming to games. There's just a greater investment overall in the program. So didn't really feel like too much of a step backwards. Kind of just felt like a circumstantial thing. But yeah, we're excited about the future.
What is the outlook there in Kennesaw as far as this? Like, is there excitement about going to the Conference USA? What is the overall feel for you guys in making that move this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of a sucker for the Atlantic Sun. I just think it's one of the most entertaining low major basketball conferences. But Conference USA is obviously a step up, playing bigger brands in bigger venues, on national TV. So we're excited about it. I think are well aware that it's going to take some time to get acclimated, and we're not just going to burst onto the scene and go win a conference title. If I'm proven wrong, then awesome. But that's not the expectation. It's not quite like the football transition where we have so much going against us and there's so much work to be done. But it's probably going to take a year or two till we're really, in the conference races. But a lot of young talent on the team, great freshman class, which I think we'll get to in a second. But we're excited. Excited to play some of these schools.
Tell us a little bit about this roster, because again, you were entirely new to all of us as far as watching Conference USA basketball. What are some names on this starting rotation, the mainstays that were here last year that are coming back that we should keep an eye on this season?
So Simeon Cottle is the one true veteran on this team. He's a junior. He's been here all 3 years. He's a streaky shooter. When he's going, he'll drop 28 points like it's nothing. And then when he gets in a rut, it's not the best watch. Other than that, it's almost entirely fresh faces. Brought in, a great freshman class, like I alluded to earlier. Braden Liu is a guy that we're really, really excited about, a guy who probably is too talented to be playing at Kennesaw State. I mean, the word is watch him this year because he's probably going to be elsewhere next year. I mean, he had all sorts of offers, including high majors, and guess it was just a great relationship with the coaching staff or whatever that brought him here. I mean, he was a 2-time 6A player of the year in high school. Really, really good. Going to be an immediate contributor. We brought in Ricardo Wright, who, was a really important rotational piece at SMU. We're expecting him to be able to shoot the lights out. He's going to be a day one contributor. He's a 5th-year guy, savvy veteran, really underrated addition in the offseason, in my opinion. And then some of the other freshmen that we're excited about. Adrian Woolley is also expected to be a day one contributor, started guy, maybe even a starter. Mekhi Turner is the big man we brought in the freshman class. He was injured his last year of high school. I think it was a torn ACL. So he's still sort of rehabbing that. He's been practicing near full, which has been good, but he's still sort of a project. There's Ricky McKenzie. He's a local kid from Marietta, right down the road at Wheeler High School. He's also sort of a project kid. And then Ramon Seals, who is a bit of a dark horse. He's like a prep school basketball academy kid from Tampa. But the coaches have really liked what they've seen from him. And I could see him, anywhere from redshirting and, sitting out the year to, starting half the games. He's kind of the mystery right now. But yeah, brought in Andre Ware from Florida Gulf Coast. He's the kind of plug-in big man. I believe he's a redshirt junior. He can stretch the floor. He's got good size. He's 6'9". So yeah, it's a mix of, fresh young faces and kind of some plug-in guys to give us a shot. So yeah.
To take a little break on the roster talk, when you talk about Kennesaw State basketball, maybe the brand that is, what are the areas that this team needed to improve upon going into this season to be more competitive in Conference USA? And with those adjustments you think they need to make, does your offseason and the additions that they make address those issues?
I hope so. The glaring issue last year was defense. I mean, we could score with anybody. We were putting up, I believe, over 80 points a game. I'd have to go back and fact check that. But when you're giving up 90 a night, it's hard to beat anybody. And that's just coaching. That's, hard to scout, at least, from an amateur like myself when it comes to watching guys in high school. It's easier to get a better read of, players offensively. But we got to figure out the defense. Coaching staff seems to be putting a huge emphasis on that. And has all off season. So that's kind of what sticks out. And really, we're not going to know till we actually see him play basketball. But other than that, I mean, we were a good shooting team last year when we were hot. Brought in a lot of shooters. Like I said, off the air, a lot of size. Everybody's kind of that wing archetype that's 6'6" to 6'7", can shoot the rock type of player. So if we keep that rolling and these freshmen get acclimated quicker than expected, they're going to cause some problems, and we're going to be able to beat a lot of teams in the conference on any given night.
Yeah, looking at the roster, one thing that did stand out is everyone's over 6 foot, except I believe you got one guard that's just under that. So I think from a length perspective, as long as they have the athleticism, which is very typical for teams down in the Southeast, the recruiting is just, it's natural that you're going to have athletic wings because that's the style that we play down here in the Southeast in high school. So I look forward to seeing what the Owls have. When I pull up the power ranking as voted on by yourself and your fellow podcasting members, Kennesaw State comes in there in the 8th spot there in that lower tier with New Mexico State, Jacksonville State, and FIU, and they do get the edge over returning Jacksonville State for their second year than FIU, who's been a mainstay in Conference USA. I pose this question to you because we know the brands, as you already mentioned at the very beginning about this conference. You got Western Kentucky, you got Louisiana Tech, Sam Houston's are returning regular season champions. What does Kennesaw State need to do? Because I don't know that conference championship is on your plate right now. At least maybe that's on a current objective. But what needs to happen this season to put yourself maybe in that middle tier and maybe even as the season goes on, get yourself into that conference championship discussion?
The freshmen need to outperform expectations. I mean, this class that's coming in is believed to be the future. This is the, cornerstone building block class of the next 3 or 4 years. And we're all excited about where they can get. But if they're, ahead of where they're supposed to be, and, come in day one and show that they can compete, then I think we find ourselves closer to the middle of the conference than the bottom.
And before we sign off here, keep talking hoops a little bit on the women's side. Again, newcomers to the conference. I know that you guys return a lot of minutes. That's something that you should, again, give you some level of continuity and upper hand when you're moving into a new conference. Any names that we should keep an outlook on, as well as, what do you expect out of the Lady Owls?
100%. Princess Harden was a player that we expected to be preseason all conference, and she wasn't. And obviously preseason rankings or, all conference teams don't really mean anything, but we think she's going to take a lot of people by surprise, and she's going to be one of those top tier players in the conference. Just looking up and down the roster, your 6 returning, or you got your 6 top scorers are returning. So there's a lot of continuity, a lot of good chemistry. That's for sure. And then you got some interesting newcomers, a lot of which are, projects. We got a girl who came in from Senegal, and she's 6'6", but she's a very raw talent, and she's a developmental player. We got another girl in Claire Davis, who is a D2 player, who we wanted coming out of high school. And for whatever reason, she ended up going D2 at a school in Florida. But she was supposed to, come in and address some of the shooting woes that the team had last year. So, hopefully she helps us pick that up. But they've got a further way to go than the men do. That's for sure. This is a bigger transition for them. So it's going to take probably another year or so if everything goes correctly for them to get up to speed in the conference. This is, I think, a feel it out type of year for them. But, also exciting to play some of those bigger brands. Like I know your school, MTSU, has quite the program over there. So just being able to be on the same stage with some of those teams is going to be cool for them.
To give you a little credit, I do think Kennesaw State should be maybe someone you keep an eye on. As we saw last year with FIU as a surprise team in the conference that not many people gave credit to. I think the ladies are in that boat because of someone like Princess Harden, as you mentioned. And someone else has been in the conference, Kiara Griffin, that just transferred in. So I would like to caution fans for Conference USA as you're very capable, because we've seen teams in this conference in the past have a one-star standout that has carried the ladies team pretty far. So I'm interested to see how Harden's game transfers over to the ladies. But that does it for our time with Kai Millett. Again, he's a co-host of the Owl Chat podcast, along with John, producer Nick, right? Nick
Massaroni, yes, sir.
Nick Massaroni, that's right. So that's your producer over there. But Kai, I appreciate you stopping by and talking a little hoops with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on as always.
Joining our basketball preview episode, it is Caleb Williams. He is the co-host of the 700 Pelham Road podcast, the representative for Jacksonville State here on the Roundtable. Caleb, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
So, Caleb, tell us a little bit about Jacksonville State this year. I know last year didn't go the way you wanted to, early exit in the Conference USA tournament. This year, you're going to have to replace, one of the top scorers in the conference as well. What are the expectations for this group going into this season?
It's actually, you mentioned last year, and Kai Tandy, one of the best guards really in Jacksonville State history. When you just look at kind of the season he had, you could put it up there with any guard in JSU history, and it's one of the best. So replacing him, big loss. So kind of like last year when there was just so much turnover, we don't really know what the expectations should be. With Ray Harper, we're always in it. He's taken us to 2 NCAA tournaments. He's won multiple regular season titles here between the OVC, the ASUN, and now. He hasn't won it at Conference USA. It's only been 1 year, but I would not be shocked if at some point he did win a tournament or at least a regular season here. So, I always say middle of the pack just because, this is a great basketball conference and we've got a lot to replace. There some guys that returned. Mason Nicholson, one of the biggest players in basketball, 6'10", 280. He comes back. He was a kind of starter, kind of a reserve player last year. He kind of hopped in and out depending on, 1, stamina, and 2, kind of what the lineup across from us looked like. You really couldn't play him against small lineups. But we have some guys that we expect to contribute. Marcellus Brigham Jr. is back. This is his last season. kind of a swing forward. So he can put the ball in the hoop. He can defend well. But we have some new additions. Caleb Johnson, grad transfer. He's watched his tape again, kind of that 6'7", 210 mold. You can kind of play both ways. Can handle a little bit, play a little bit off the ball. So it just seems like it's a lot of outside of Mason Nicholson, it's a lot of those guys that can just kind of swing from the 1 to the 4. So I would say if you had to look at JSU, just expect a lot of small ball. This could be one of the fastest teams we've ever had. It's just going to be a matter of can we score enough, make enough baskets to win.
I want to expand on that question there about the incoming new guys, because in today's basketball game, it is so vital what teams are capable of doing in the offseason. So you talk about the losses you have to these new additions that you find, whether in the portal or through the signing class. Any names there that we should be keeping an eye on that could have an immediate impact?
I really think that Caleb Johnson's going to be kind of the guy. He plays forward. He'll probably play a lot of 3 and a decent amount of 4. But he's a guy who can put the ball in the basket from deep, here and there. I mentioned Mason Nicholson. He's not a new addition, but he was last year as a transfer. And I think this year he'll play a lot more. I think he's a guy that's jumping into the lineup a lot more this year. I really would expect that, early in the game, his size could really present a lot of problems. Would not be surprised to see a lot of teams we play get into foul trouble early just from having to defend him on the low block. I'd also look at Ben Baea from France. He's a grad student. He played at ECU the last several years. Kind of was buried on the bench, but he 2 years ago at ECU, he did have a game where he made 6 threes. Like this is a guy who can put it in the basket when he gets the opportunity. And I think, in this conference, this team, I think he'll have that shot. I think the rotation's wide open. I'd look at Aiden Driggers. He's actually a local guy from Aniana, which is about 30 to 45 minutes from Jacksonville. He has been at actually at Marion Military Institute, if you can believe that. Played a lot. Made 21 starts. Again, solid shooter from the field. We also brought in another center from Russia, actually at 7 foot, 235. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name because I guarantee you I'll mispronounce it. But he played for Charlotte and for USC. So that he can play. He played with the big boys. So again, it's wide open rotation. I think you probably want to center on Caleb Johnson, but I wouldn't be surprised if other guys contribute as well.
Yeah, the Russian. I'll give a stab. I think his last name is Niagu. But at 7 foot tall, he's going to be. I would have to believe the tallest, if not one of the tallest, in Conference USA this year. So to be interesting to see, because we have some guys in this conference that have made that move from the P4 back down to the G5. So I'm excited to see what he has to offer to the table. But to go back to the conversation of Tandy, no longer with Jacksonville State this year. Obviously, you didn't pick anyone up in the portal that's going to have that kind of scoring production. Not that that's was the goal, because I don't think that those guys filter into Conference USA very often. But when you look at this roster as a whole, do you think the offense is going to take a step back? Will it have to go to more of a balanced approach? Or like you've already touched on with Caleb Johnson, do you think this team is going to be a one-score all, or is it going to be more balanced approach this year?
I think you see, this is kind of, you look back at Ray Harper when he was at Western Kentucky, and Western fans are going to kill me for even talking about it, but when he was there and even earlier in his time here, he didn't have really any rock star scorers. He had several 5, 6, 7 guys that could give you 10 to 15, and that was the offense. It was deep. They play 8, 9 deep, sometimes even 10 deep. Really the best, single seasons we've had before Kaikai Tandy was, I go back to even when we were back in the OVC pre-COVID. Jason Burnell was starting power forward, and he averaged, I think, 20 and 10 in 29. It was 20. It was whatever year John Morant was. It was at his last year at Murray State before he got drafted, because we played them in the conference semifinals, and should have won. And then Magic Johnson went on national TV and talked about how we didn't deserve to win. Yeah, we don't talk about that game, but I think it'll be balanced. I could see Caleb Johnson leading the pack. I think when you look at his athleticism, he's got a solid jump shot. I could see him being the number one guy, but I don't think the gap between number one and the field is going to be as wide as it was last year, where you had Tandy at just about 20 a night, and everyone else is kind of in that 10 to 12 range. I think it'll be 3 or 4 guys around 15, and then kind of everyone filter down around that.
So when we look at our preseason power rankings that was voted on by our roundtable members, Jacksonville State they're near the bottom. They're at 9th in the conference now that we have 10 teams. So they're 9th out of 10. When you see that ranking, are you a little surprised?
Yes and no. I mean, this is. I'm not going to pretend this is a team that played just elite basketball last year. I mean, early exit in the tournament, final record under 500. I mean, we didn't play great. Part of it, we always front load our non-conference schedule with solid teams. I mean, you look this year, we've got Air Force, Georgia State, Coastal Carolina, ECU, Missouri. That's our non-conference slate, and I mean, I can't guarantee we win any of those games. There's a lot of good teams. Several of those have made the tournament over the last several years. So being 9th, I'm not totally shocked. I think this is a better team than a 9th place finish in the Conference USA. I would not be surprised if they finish 4th or 5th and, have a home seed for the beginning of the tournament. But at the same time, this is a team that if they just don't defend well, struggle to make baskets again, outside of having one guy, absolutely could finish 9th or 10th. And I think we'll learn a lot early, especially when we get into conference play. I think we'll learn a lot about who really is going to, lead the pack. But I think the beauty of this conference and, the way that NIL and transfer portal work now, every year is a brand new year, especially with basketball, because you're only rostering. I mean, you have 15 scholarships in basketball. This isn't, 80, you don't have 85, I guess now, moving up to whatever football is, but you only have 15 scholarships. And those 15 players could be anywhere from, Zion Williamson to, just a random walk-on whose name you'll never hear ever again. I mean, it's those scholarships at this level, at this conference, we could end up, we could win the whole we could be first. I mean, it's just the beauty of kind of being a conference that gets picked over every year by the big boys is every year is a new year.
Absolutely. A lot of excitement around the conference this year for a lot of teams. Before we sign off, Caleb, I always like to have the guests come on and tell us a little bit about the ladies program, the women, and especially for you guys going through some changes this year. I know how bitter the Kennesaw State rivalry is with you guys. Kiera Griffin leaves, so I expect some parting words for her. But but tell us about the women's team this year.
Well, and I think the beauty with having Rick Petrie as head coach is we could go winless, and I guarantee you every loss will be by 5 points or less. Like he's one of the, I mean, you talk about grinding out tough games with a roster that sometimes isn't very good. I mean, he's had some great rosters last few years. You mentioned if you have anyone transfer to Kennesaw State, regardless of what sport it is, there will be words for her when we play them. And I don't imagine we'll be allowed to repeat any of them on a podcast. I really don't. That's about as sick of a move. And honestly, if it were a Kennesaw State player transferring here, we joke and be like, we took one of your players, but it'd also be like, you're going to have hell to pay when you go back to Atlanta. So with that being said, Rick Petrie, again, he grinds it out. He's tough. They play physical basketball. I mean, if you watch any JSU women's basketball really over the last 10 years, they're swinging the rock, get it inside, banging down low. That's JSU women's basketball. They play on the low and high block, and then they knock down the open threes when they come. But they don't try to force bad threes. They'll use all 30 seconds of the shot clock if they have to, and so they're going to win a lot of games in that 50 to 60 point range. But that means you have to play at their pace. They slow the game down as well as anyone. So I'd look at it from a standpoint of, again, wide open conference, a little bit less wide open with women's. We don't get as picked over in the women's side as we do the men's for whatever reason, because there are great women's basketball players in this conference. Yeah, I mean, I really think that as long as Coach Petrie's on the sideline, we're going to be in it in the regular season. We're going to be in it in the tournament. Would not be surprised, at the least, if this team is at least an NIT team at the end of the season. I think they're that good.
Absolutely. Well, great stuff from Caleb Williams, a co-host of the 700 Pelham Road podcast. Caleb, I appreciate you stopping by and telling us a little bit about the Gamecocks basketball season.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
We are joined now by co-host of the Pause Up podcast, our representative of the FIU Golden Panthers here on the Conference USA Roundtable. A new face to those of us that have been here on the Roundtable. It is Kevin Barral. Kevin, how's it going, man?
How are we doing, Jake? Excited to be on. I may not be on the roundtables, but I definitely watch you guys every time, and definitely like what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, Kevin, him and Jake both work at the Pause Up podcast. I like a lot of their work. They cover all the bases. So, of course, if you want to keep up with the FIU Panthers, I highly recommend the Pause Up podcast. But, of course, Kevin and Jake individually are great follows for a lot of that stuff. So, Kevin, let's go ahead and dive on into the basketball season here a little bit on the men's side of things. Last year wasn't the year you wanted. What is it going to take for this program to kind of feel good about themselves this upcoming year?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Not a great year. Definitely a tough schedule, to say the least. A lot of very good opponents. You have Miami in there. Teams that you should have beat. You should have beat FGCU probably. Could have beat Tarleton State. A lot of games that should have been wins, but unfortunately weren't. And obviously you played UCF to kick off the season. And a tough record on the road as well, only going 1-12 on the road. Never want to see that. But and there was a lot of big losses. Arturo Dean heading to Oklahoma State was by far the biggest one. But aside from that, really, I think FIU is going to be relying a lot of the returning players. You're going to have a healthy Deshaun Giddens, a healthy Jonathan Abar, two guys who missed almost all of conference play last season. And FIU did win some big games. They beat Liberty. I believe they beat them at home. They beat Sam Houston State at home as well. So they had some big wins, and they're just going to take that into the year number 2 with this, second year now after a really tough last year. I mean, returners are going to help. You have Jaden Lipscomb, who kind of stretches the floor a little bit for you. And then the new guys. I mean, Sim Jones is a guy who they are extremely excited about. They believe he could be the starting point guard for this team, kind of that replacement of Arturo. Doesn't have the same skill set necessarily, but he provides that, true point guard that's going to find options out there, and he's going to score when he needs to. So there's a lot of optimism, to say the least. They're really excited. I mean, one of the big things they really emphasized this offseason was getting in shape, making sure they're in the best shape possible going into the season. And that's one thing they've done, and they're very excited about it. And it's a team that doesn't necessarily have that one key player, but it's a lot of guys who can do different things that kind of help each other out. And definitely a lot of excitement here at FIU when it comes to the men's basketball squad.
To add to that, you talk about Arturo Dean, who's someone that was, I believe, his freshman of the year 2 years ago. Obviously, was a first teamer last year. Made a lot of waves when the announcement came that he was entering the portal. Went to Oklahoma State, as you said. How do you grade out the offseason moves? Like you said, you're not going to be able to find another Arturo Dean, but do these replacements complement what he brought to the table?
More or less. Obviously, the fast-paced tempo that FIU ran was perfect for someone like an Arturo Dean, who was really able to create a lot of quick options out there, quick plays, which is something that he provided that I don't think you'll see many guys on this team doing. He was by far the quickest player on the team, not really that fast of a guy. They brought a lot of guys who kind of play the more traditional role of the point guard, something Arturo did pretty well, but just – when you think of Arturo Dean, you're going to think of a scoring first point guard, a guy who on defense is going to be the national leader in steals per game, which is something he did, or, total steals he had. He was great. He was at the top of that. So, You bring in a Sim Jones from JUCO, who, as I had mentioned a little bit, a traditional guy. He's going to find the right pass. He's going to pass up a shot for a better one. He's going to make plays. He's going to create, and that's something that FIU truly didn't have too much of. I think maybe the pace is going to be a little bit slower than what we saw last season, and we know that Jeremy Ballard, their head coach over there, is very, when you talk about FIU, the first thing a lot of these broadcasters or even media members mention is just the fast tempo that FIU plays with on both sides of the ball. I think we're going to maybe see it a little slowing down a little bit. And then you look at the other names that they brought in, an Ashton Williamson, who was one of the newest freshmen for the team, and he's going to play. I mean, you don't see many true freshmen play nowadays. You see them a lot of them redshirt. Ashton Williamson is going to play. He's a backup point guard. He's really good. He's a pretty tall guy as well, so he's going to play. He's really good. I'm excited to see what he does. He's, again, one of those traditional point guards that you see guys going to, again, find a better shot. He's going to create on his own. So there's a lot to be excited about with the names coming in. And I don't think you're going to find an Arturo Rodin, but I think the speed of these guys still isn't to his level, but it's really close. And you're going to have enough guys where you could rotate them, and you're going to still cause havoc on defense and even something on offense, catch some teams by surprise really quickly.
I want to turn the attention back to the returning production, and I'll take full responsibility that this guy was totally off my radar last year. But as I was looking to vote for the all-conference team, Deshaun Gittens is a guy that very well-rounded guard. I mean, the points are there, 9 points per game. 9 points per game, 3.5 rebounds per game, and nearly 3 assists per game. I mean, the guy is as well-rounded as you get in the conference, and the turnover numbers aren't that bad either. So that, again, just kind of compliments to how smart he is with the basketball. But I want to ask a little bit about Gittens' game. What is it going to take for him to kind of take up that next step, as well as any other returning production names that we should keep an eye on this year?
Yeah, Gittens is obviously the first one. They're going to be relying on him a lot. I think he's going to be the primary scorer for this team. Unfortunately, went down with an injury, which cut his season short. And really before that, just wasn't playing too much due to these injuries. So that's the big one. Then you have a Jonathan Abar who's coming back. Once again, missed a lot of time due to injuries, I believe a knee injury. And they're really managing him very carefully throughout these practices. Days he plays, days he doesn't, just to make sure that he's healthy for that first game against Rice. And he's someone who, he will spread the floor very well despite, the height and maybe, just the overall thought of a big man. You don't nowadays, big men need to shoot. And he certainly brings that good mid-range game. I like what he provides as well. Probably be the starting center or even power forward, which is a plus. And then you mentioned some other guys. I mean, Jalen Lipscomb had a very nice season. Didn't start playing too much, but, as the season went on, he played a lot more, and he's by far their best three-point shooter on the team. George Pridgett Jr. is returning as well. Great shooter from beyond the arc. That's a guy who I'm really excited about watching. Then you have Okechukwu Okeke, who was one of the bigger names that they brought in this past season from the transfer portal, and he's a big guy, 6'9", 235. We're really excited to see what he does. Finally getting more incorporated in the offense. It was definitely some troubles for him just getting used to that quick style of play, but it definitely seems like he's now adapting a lot better to it, and it's exciting to see. So, the return, JB was mentioning this, Jeremy Ballard, that they were pretty blessed when it comes to the transfer portal. They didn't have many guys leave. I mean, Javante Hawkins left obviously because he graduated, and same thing goes with Seth Pinckney. Arturo Dean was really the only player that entered the portal along with Petar Kravakovic, but I mean, aside from that, they have almost the same exact team from last year. Just a couple of new guys who've entered entered this team.
The continuity could definitely play a huge part in a turnaround for this team this year. And as I pull up the roundtables voting for the preseason, the Panthers were selected 10th. They're at the bottom of the conference for this upcoming season. I'm sure you could create an argument for why they don't belong down there, but I want to hear, again, maybe another expansion on the expectations for this team. Tell us why this team has the ability to be a threat in the conference.
Well, I think their offense definitely is something that you don't really see in college basketball, just that quick tempo that caught a lot of teams off guard. And I mean, they beat the top teams in this conference before. They beat Western Kentucky last year. They beat Sam Houston. They beat Liberty. I mean, they beat these teams, and there's games that they should have won, honestly. I mean, they should have beat Middle Tennessee, and they should have won some other games. So definitely, I think they have a chance to create some havoc on both sides of the ball, especially the defensive side. Again, you mentioned, I mean, it's continuity. You have another year with your same staff, same coaching staff. You have another year with a lot of the same guys, and they're bringing in a lot more height, which is something that's huge. You have Vianney, you have Ibo, two guys who are going to provide a lot of help in the rebounding game. FIU struggled to rebound last year big time. I believe they were the worst team in Conference USA when it came to rebounding, and I think that's something that they really took to heart, and they brought in guys to do it. So I think FIU is going to have an advantage, at least when it comes to quickness. When it comes to the offensive side of things, FIU was a great team that caused a lot of turnovers, and I think that'll definitely play in. And looking at that power rankings, I definitely think they probably should have been over Jacksonville State. They lost Kiki Tandy. FIU beat them in the conference tournament. But again, I 100% see why they're ranked dead last in this rankings. And honestly, probably, and I think it already came out, the polls, the Conference USA polls, that I think they're also last. So I'm not surprised by that. But I think, just like every team, they're going to take that to heart, and they're going to use that as motivation. I think this FIU team is definitely going to do that, and they're very, very excited for what's to come.
Well, good stuff from Kevin Burrell as always. But before we close up the call here, the women's basketball team was a surprise of Conference USA last year. Jessica Burks-Wiley, head coach, coach of the year last year in Conference USA before that turnaround. I know they lost a little production at the top, but what can you give us a quick preview on the ladies this year?
Yeah, I mean, they look great. I've watched maybe a couple practices. Obviously, they have Tanasia Hayes, who's coming back, and a couple other names out there. And they were voted towards the top of the conference. And their expectations is not just to have the season that they had last year, but to go even further into the Conference USA tournament, something they weren't able to do. Had some big wins last year. They're playing a pretty tough schedule as well. You have Miami on there, really good team. So I'm excited to see what they could do. Definitely got to keep my eyes on them, because that's a team that could really show up and show out, and that's something that they're looking to do. They're looking to go as far as they can into this tournament. Their expectations are championship or bust.
Excellent stuff, Kevin. Well, I appreciate you stopping by the round table, and we look forward to seeing more stuff from you this season.